Hello and welcome to the Tracy Sandler Show, brought to you by Fivo. I am your host, Tracy Sandler, and I really could not be more excited about today's guest, NBC Sports Peter King, joining us today. And Peter really is the king of all NFL coverage, so it is truly a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show. So welcome, Peter.
Tracy, I'm so happy to be with you. Thank you. Thanks for asking.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a really big game to talk about this weekend, Sunday Night Football. Taylor Swift won't be there, but I still think it's going to be an exciting football game.
Unless she starts dating Brock Purdy in the next few days.
Potentially, though Brock Purdy is engaged, and I feel like his fiance.
I guess about that. So I guess that's out. Yeah.
So that's probably out. As a Swiftie, though, I'm very upset the 49ers are not playing the Chiefs this season, but we'll see what happens in February. But still,
hey, you're a Swiftie. Did you go to a show at Levi's Stadium?
Sure did. I went to a show at Levi's Stadium. It was amazing. I mean, honestly, it was amazing. Whatever you've heard, it was better. I feel like I can say that. It was
my daughter lives in Seattle and she went too. She loved it. Yeah.
It was great. 3.5 hours. I mean, that's like unheard of, night after night. It was incredible.
You know what was amazing? And I got to hand it to Taylor Swift that, okay, so I read a bunch of stuff about this concert. And the thing that amazed me the most is that she did 6 shows in 6 nights in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Who can do a 3.5 hour show every night for 6 nights?
That's ridiculous. The thing. It's incredible. And she performs. I mean, she sings, she dances. I mean, she doesn't dance like maybe like Beyonce dances, but she is performing, really performing. It's truly incredible. And it was really fun.
Cool.
Really
very cool.
So that was very fun. So at least I did get to see her at Levi's Stadium, but chances are she won't be here Sunday. In theory, maybe she's just become a huge football fan now. She's going to go around the country, but the 49ers will be hosting the Dallas Cowboys. This is a big game for both of these teams. The 49ers, one of 2 only undefeated teams left in the league, but I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, or even close to one, that the Cowboys are the biggest test that they've had so far. I think the Cowboys, the Niners, the Eagles are probably the best teams in the NFC right now. So this should be a very exciting matchup. From your perspective, what's the first thing you're looking out for and excited to see?
I just think it's a much bigger game for Dallas than it is for San Francisco. I think that in the last 2 meetings between these teams, Dallas has come up woefully short in the big play department. If you look back 2 years ago at the end of the game in Arlington, Texas, in the playoffs, you see that Dak Prescott, I'm not saying he lost track of time. I think he thought he could scramble for a big gain, get up, spike the ball, whatever. But whatever he thought, he didn't do. And that's a pockmark on Dak right there. And obviously on Mike McCarthy, too. And then last year, you know, honestly, Tracy, when I think back to that game, which I covered, I think back to, I think there was about 2 minutes and 50 seconds left in the game. Cowboys got the ball 1st and 10. They got to drive the length of the field to try to tie the game or win it late. And they go 3 and out. They have 0 positive plays. Dak gets sacked. He misses not a wide open, but an open enough Michael Gallup up the right seam. And 48 seconds later, they got to punt the ball. And I remember writing after that game, I said, those are 48 seconds that Jerry Jones will never get back. And they had a golden opportunity that day to beat the big bad 49ers, and they didn't do it. So that's 2 years in a row they've had epic fails, and that they've scored in the teens and haven't been this all-powerful offense. So I think this is an important game for Dak Prescott, but it's also a very important game for Mike McCarthy because he took over the play calling. No one in Dallas will say it, but I believe that game, and particularly the end of that game, cost Kellen Moore his job. And so Mike McCarthy now gets to do it the way he wants to do it. I had a talk with him about 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about him taking over this job. And he said, basically I just let too many things that I wanted to do get away from me. So I decided that I was going to take him back. And, I talked to Jerry Jones in training camp, and he said when Mike McCarthy got this job, whatever, 2.5 years ago, whatever it is, I wanted him to be the play caller. I wanted him to be the play designer. He didn't want to do it because at the time we were going along pretty good with Kellen Moore. So out of respect for him, I said, okay. But he said, it's time, and we need to get the full Mike McCarthy now. A lot of people will say, well, be careful what you wish for, the full Mike McCarthy. But I think this is a huge test for the Cowboys. And I honestly think if they come up short, and I mean, don't play very well and don't get a lot going on offense, it's going to be hard on both Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy in the coming weeks. They've got to show out on Sunday night.
Well, it's interesting, like what you said, be careful what you wish for. But, with Mike McCarthy, it's like the blessing and the curse. Okay, now it's me and it's on me and I get to do it my way. But then if it doesn't work, it's on me and I've done it my way and it doesn't work. So when you look at the coming weeks, if they are to come up short, this might be a ridiculous question because of where Dallas is and where they've gone the last couple of years, but does Mike McCarthy start to become on the hot seat sooner rather than later?
I doubt it. I mean, the Cowboys are good. They're going to have a good season. They're going to make the playoffs. I would be very surprised if Jerry Jones hit the panic button and fired Mike McCarthy, especially if a third consecutive season ended in a playoff berth.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But, look, you can't tell what's going to happen. Who thought that 4 games into this season, we'd be firing Matt Eberflus and saying that the Chicago Bears are the biggest disaster in recent NFL history?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably going too far, but they're a disaster.
I don't know if it's going too far. It's pretty bad.
Yeah. You don't really know. And that's why I think you just have to let it play out a little bit. I'd be surprised if McCarthy got on the hot seat this year.
All right. Well, let's look a little bit deeper into Sunday. You have there are so many storylines here. Obviously, this is a long time rivalry that has become bigger in the last few years because of what we just talked about, the last couple of playoff games, and now obviously this game coming up. You have Kyle Shanahan meeting his old boss, Dan Quinn. And although years have passed, you can tell when Kyle talks about Dan Quinn just how much respect he has for him. And that Dallas defense has been incredible. I mean, no one cares about my fantasy football team, but my 2 wins are directly thanks to the Dallas defense. So this Dallas defense has been pretty incredible, but it goes up against a pretty big defense or pretty great defense in San Francisco. What are you looking to see here against, in this team? And what does this Dallas defense have to do to stop this juggernaut of a 49ers offense, especially when Christian McCaffrey?
See, I think last week when I watched a big chunk of the Niners game. I've one of the teams I find myself fascinated with this year is the Arizona Cardinals.
That's
I mean,
fair.
I thought Arizona and Houston coming into this year were going to end up the 2 worst teams in the league. And wow, I'm really impressed with both of them. But so I watched a lot of the game, and the one thing about Christian McCaffrey that continues to, I don't even want to say amaze me, but do you remember, Tracy, when this trade was made 11 months ago, trading him for a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5? And, your first thought is, holy cow, this is a guy who's basically missed half of the previous 2 years with injury. And are you sure you want to trade that much for him and all that? Well, obviously he has not missed a football game since, whatever it is, 19 games, whatever, 20, including the playoffs. And he hasn't missed a single game. But what is really impressive about him is that I think he can play 3 different positions and be incredibly impactful. People talk about Bijan Robinson now and how great he's been, and he can play all over the map. Well, Christian McCaffrey's better, The reason that Christian McCaffrey is better is because he can win a physical battle between the tackles. Now,
Mhm.
not with Aaron Donald, but with a linebacker,
Mhm.
and he does so very often.
Mhm.
And so I think that's the one thing. When I first thought about this trade, I said, wow, they're giving up too much for a guy who might not be healthy consistently over the next 3 or 4 years. But one thing I find interesting now in looking back on it and really having a little bit of perspective on it is, if I'm not mistaken, and I wrote it this week, I should remember it. I think the second round pick was the 61st overall pick. So, yeah, okay. So it's a second round pick, but it's a very low second round pick.
Right.
And I look at it now as I consider sort of the price that they paid. And if you think about it, really, I definitely don't anymore think that they paid too much.
They may not have paid enough.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
I mean, without Christian McCaffrey, that team does not go to the NFC Championship game. I'm not entirely sure that team goes to the playoffs. I mean, at the time of the trade, they traded him. He was here for 2 days before the Chiefs come to town. So then they're 3-5, and they haven't lost a regular season game since. And they may not have lost the NFC Championship game if Brock Purdy hadn't lost his elbow. I went to grab my elbow for that. Hadn't lost his elbow. So when you see the impact he has on this offense and on this team generally, I think it's invaluable. Like really, they may not have, obviously you say that in jest, but a very small price to pay, in my opinion.
Well, since he got there, obviously, and even including the first game when he wasn't a huge factor in the game because he was in camp for about 10 minutes before they played that game. But in his average game is 117 rushing receiving yards per game with more than a touchdown per game. And so anybody who produces like that, and you gave the biggest pick you gave, the best pick you gave is whatever it was, 61st overall. That's a fantastic and incredibly fair trade for the 49ers, which I think really looks good right now.
And it's funny because even in that first game where he had been here 10 minutes, I remember on his first run, there was just something different. You could see it. You just were like, yep, he's different. He's just special. Yeah. And you could tell that should he stay healthy, which he has, he was going to make a big difference for this team.
Yeah, no question about it. No question.
So let's talk Brock Purdy a little bit. Well, actually, before we get to Brock Purdy, I'm going to ask you a very preliminary question because it's been a conversation the last few days, but should Christian McCaffrey be in the MVP conversation? I say yes, but I'm here a lot.
Well, I mean, whenever you consider a question like that, I think you have to ask two questions. The first is, are we talking about most valuable player or most outstanding player? It's funny. I think the CFL calls its award the most outstanding player, something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
That's interesting.
And to me, I would just ask this question. For the 49ers to beat the Cowboys on Sunday, if you had to lose one guy, would you say, I think they have a better chance to win that game if they lose Christian McCaffrey for the game or if they lose Brock Purdy for the game? So that is kind of an obvious question, I think. I think they've had a better chance to win, if Brock Purdy plays over Christian McCaffrey. So that would lend credence to say that if there's a 49er who should be in the MVP discussion, it should be Brock Purdy. But I'd also say if a running back ever deserves it after, the first 4 weeks, Christian McCaffrey deserves it.
Well, since you brought up Brock Purdy, you segue perfectly into my next conversation. And I don't disagree with you. I actually think that right now they could be competing with each other for MVP. They don't care right now because they want to win a Super Bowl, but they could be competing with each other for MVP. So in Brock Purdy, you have a quarterback that I do think people are really starting to realize is the real deal. Local media has known it. Everybody around the building has known it. They've known it for quite some time. But I do think it was hard for people to really grasp going into the season that the last pick in the draft could really be the guy. And he has really proven week after week that he is the guy. This will be his biggest test, but this is a defense that he did see in the playoffs last year. And he had moments of struggle and adversity, but ultimately they come up with the win and he played well. But he's an incredible story. But in some ways, I guess maybe for those of us who've been around it, it's not as shocking as it might seem. After those first 3 games, for me at least, after the first 3 games, after that Seattle game, I was like, okay, yeah, no, I think he might be it. He could be their franchise quarterback.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that, but honestly, Tracy, you need to see it for a while, obviously. Right. Okay. But if you consider the full Brock Purdy experience, right? Let's put Brock Purdy into some perspective right now. Okay. He's absolutely ice cold coming off the bench against a red hot Miami team in the first quarter. First experience of any big substance. And he leads them to a 16-point win. Makes a couple of big throws in the game, particularly one where he's staring down the barrel of Jalen Phillips, the young Miami pass rusher who creamed him, and he waited to the last possible second, and he hit George Kittle to convert a first down. That was a huge play in that game. And then the next week, I remember, I'll never forget, I talked to him. I was at that game against the Dolphins, and I talked to him afterwards and said, hey, by the way, for your first NFL start ever, you're going to play against Tom Brady. And he said, hey, that's pretty cool. He's been playing football longer than I've been alive. And and that's just, I think that's who he is. Like, hey, pretty cool. And I think deep down in his mind, it's not like he's saying, oh, pretty cool. Well, he's got to play me too.
Right.
It isn't quite that. He doesn't feel that way. But I think the way he does feel is, hey, that's cool, but I'm not really going to think about that. That's not going to help me win. And then, goes to Seattle, wins that game, and they played that close game against the Raiders late. But anyway, the last, he plays 6 games, 3/4 of or more of 6 games, wins them all. Then obviously, they go to the playoffs and they beat Seattle, they beat Dallas, and he gets hurt early in the Philly game. And so he's gone and the season's over. But I run down that list because, what I've been saying early in this season is I keep hearing all of this and I keep reading all this stuff and I keep looking at analytics. And even after the 49ers have scored 30 or more in every game this season, I keep hearing this, well, we'll see about Purdy. What do you want to see? Exactly. He's played 12 games, 3/4 or more of 12 NFL games. He's won all 12. And his average margin of victory has to be like 15 points. I don't know what it is, but it's he's been great. And okay, so all right, so how is he playing? Okay, here's how he is playing. He's completed 72% of his passes, has not thrown an interception, has a rating, I think he's got the highest rating in the NFL. And, at some point, you've just got to be able to look at him and say, there's no reason why he can't be a franchise quarterback. And he looks like one right now. The last thing I will say is I think one of the worst things that we do in sports media, Tracy, is we consign a player to his draft position.
Yep, I totally agree.
We never let him out of that, which I think is foolish. And in this case, I don't think of Brock Purdy as whatever, number 271. I forget what the overall pick was. Yeah, 272. I just don't think of him like that. I think of him like he's a really good player who a lot of people overlooked, and people get overlooked all the time in the NFL. I can tell you 10 players right now who are big stars who were drafted after pick 100. So that's the way it goes. Puka Nacua, how come he was the 170th pick or whatever it was? Why? Why did everybody miss on him for 4 rounds, 5 rounds? You know, so these things happen, but judge him on how he plays, not on his draft position.
Well, and Kyle Shanahan said that during training camp. He said, it does not matter where you were drafted. It matters what you do once you're there. And it's interesting, too, because the 49ers have done so well in the later rounds of the draft. Like George Kittle, Elijah Mitchell, Diamador Lenore. I mean, Elijah, not a starter anymore, but starting caliber when he can stay healthy. I mean, these are good players that they have. They have Charvarius Ward. He didn't come in as a rookie, but he was an undrafted free agent. They had Emmanuel Mosley here for a long time, who was an undrafted free agent. These are starters. These are really good guys in the league. And it is amazing. Juwan Jennings, third in Juwan. I mean, this team counts on him. He's a 7th round pick. He's a 7th round pick who got cut, signed to the practice squad. And he's now such a big part of this team. Ronnie Bell, the rookie out of Michigan. And of course, everybody knows I put my Michigan goggles on, but nonetheless, Ronnie Bell has made an impact and he's been really good. He's a 7th round pick. So you're right. We do consign people to their draft pick as if it matters. And what's also amazing about it is on the flip side, this thing that's so interesting. We've seen so many draft picks picked so high, number 1 picks, number 2, number 3, who've never materialized to what everybody thought they were going to be. And somehow that's completely normal. But the idea on the flip side of that, the guy who was drafted last, the fact that he could end up being a franchise quarterback is so surprising to people. And it's funny to me how much trouble people have accepting it, because it really doesn't matter.
I just made some notes in advance of Sunday's game, and I made some notes about all the players. It's kind of the Adam Peters note, it's all the players who got drafted 3rd round or later who, and look, it's hard to tell about this year, but, I wrote down Jake Moody and Ronnie Bell, and, 3rd round or later, and, who has been really important in their run right now. Obviously in 22 was Brock Purdy. In 21, Talanoa Hufanga, Elijah Mitchell. I mean, Hufanga is a revelation. Diamador Lenore, obviously, that year too. And, in 20, you got Juwan Jennings. 19, you got Dre Greenlaw. That is, look at all these guys. 2018, you got Fred Warner. And, it's just, you go on and you go back. And obviously, you mentioned George Kittle in 2017. And look, I just think, because that was their first draft altogether, Shanahan and John Lynch and Adam Peters, but they have done a good job. Look, you will not be a consistently excellent team without hitting on your late round picks, mid and late round picks. You don't have to hit on everyone, but you got to hit on some, and the Niners really have.
In fact, when you go back to talking about everything they gave up for Christian McCaffrey, one of them was a 5th round pick, and there was kind of a joke like, wow, they gave up a 5th rounder. They really wanted him because they've done so well in the 5th round that was almost bigger than the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So you look ahead to this game. The Niners are favored by 4, which is essentially home field advantage, is basically what that is.
Yeah.
I look at this game and I kind of struggle a little bit with I either think it's going to be really close, or I think San Francisco just completely runs away with it. And part of that could be, been watching this team the last few weeks playing teams that are certainly not the caliber to the Cowboys, and they just look so dominant. But I can't quite yet at this point in the week. I do want to bring up an injury thing that came up on Wednesday, just as an aside. And granted, we're recording this Wednesday, it'll go live on Friday, so things could change. But Charvarius Ward not practicing. He was the only new one on the injury report, not practicing Wednesday with a heel issue. He was dealing with a heel issue earlier, but it didn't keep him from playing. Now he's with a heel issue. So I think that's something to watch, because the secondary is in a somewhat precarious position if you know those starters do go down or are not available to play. But let's assume whether he plays or not, let's pretend he does. I don't know, but where do you see this game ending up, and what do you think is going to happen? I mean, I'm not asking for a crystal ball, but just in your expertise.
I have a crystal ball. I've never made an incorrect prediction in my life.
That's amazing. See, I knew I wanted to have you on the show. Great.
Kind of the way I look at this game is, I think Dallas is going to try to play keep away. Okay. I think Dallas is going to try to play clock ball a little bit with this team. I think the most important player for Dallas in this game, we talked about Dak Prescott, how this is a crucial game for him. But honestly, I think the most important game for the Cowboys is most important player is Tony Pollard, and and just the running game as a whole. And I'll tell you why. Because the Cowboys let Ezekiel Elliott go, which I thought was the right move to make. They let Ezekiel Elliott go. They gave the job to Tony Pollard. I worry a little bit about Tony Pollard's ability to be, I think he's 17 or 18 carries a game this year. And he's always been one of those guys who you say, well, he's not really the workhorse type. Okay. And so but I think this is the kind of game where if the Cowboys need a guy to be a dominant player in this game, it's Tony Pollard, because they don't want Dak Prescott to throw it 38 times. Right. Because that is going to make a pass rush against a weakened Dallas offensive line, against the great Bosa, against Eric Armstead, against Javon Hargrave. I mean, you want to be able to control the game, okay? And my feeling about this game, honestly, is that if they don't control the game on the ground, I think I really think they're going to be in trouble if they can't control the game on the ground. So I view it as Tony Pollard being really, really important. And I think from San Francisco's perspective, I wouldn't be all that concerned about the Dallas passing game, but I would be concerned about a driven Dak Prescott, because I think Prescott feels this deep down inside. And what he feels is, the last 2 years in the playoffs, I haven't played well. And I need to come up big in a game that is a big game, even though it's not in January or February. It is a very big game, because we have to convince ourselves that we can beat the 49ers, that we can score on the 49ers. So that's the way I kind of look at it. If I'm the Niners, I'm just looking at it, let's just play our game and not turn it over. If we play our game and we don't turn it over, we're going to win this game. Yep. That's the way I look at it. I agree wholeheartedly. I think that is the key. I actually think for the 49ers, that's the key for them every week. This week and every week, if they play their game and they don't turn the ball over, they really can't be. I mean, they can be stopped, but you know what I'm saying. It's going to be hard to beat. I mean, look, any team can lose. We just saw Miami lose by 28. We all thought Miami a week ago was the best team in football, and they got rolled in Buffalo. Any team can lose any week. The 49ers could lose. I mean, things can happen in this game. Absolutely. Dak hits CeeDee Lamb on a couple of big shots downfield. Dallas easily could win this game. Dallas is a really good team. Micah Parsons is hell on wheels, but I just think the 49ers do more things better, I think, than Dallas.
I agree with that. I would agree with that. And what I have seen thus far, it should be a really good game. It's a big test for both teams, Sunday night football. And I agree, even though it's not January or February, I think this game really matters, because come January, February, both teams will look back on this one and it will have something to do with their mindset, because these teams could very well meet each other again in the playoffs. Jerry Jones said it himself earlier this week that he thinks the 49ers are the most likely team to go win the Super Bowl, but he hopes they have to go through Dallas twice. So we shall see. Peter, thank you so much for joining me. This was awesome.
Hey, Tracy, listen, thanks a lot for asking. Happy to be with you, and good luck this weekend.
Thank you. Where can everybody find you and your work? Just let everyone know.
You can find me at NBCSports.com on Monday mornings. I write a column called Football Morning in America. It's, if you're in Pacific time, that's good, because you can read it. If you're a night owl, you can read it before you go to bed, because it usually posts about 11:45 p.m. Pacific on Sunday night. So that's kind of what I do. Tracy, I used to work a lot harder than I do right now. I'm really at the absolute total mail it in stage of my life now. So I'm just kidding. But no, that's the only thing I do now. And I do the Peter King podcast. And I try to be a little bit imaginative these days in what I'm doing. I went and covered Deion Sanders last week, which was fun. Yeah, but no, all is well, and having a fun year so far. So hopefully the fun continues.
Well, thank you so much for being on. You guys, if you like what you heard, and I know you did, please make sure to give us a 5-star rating and a super positive review. You can find me at Tracy FGSN and on Instagram at Tracy Sandler. We are brought to you by FIVO. We are brought to you by Bet Online. And those are all my announcements for the day. Enjoy the game, and I'll talk to everybody next time. Bye, all.